folks, Husky-Flies here, back with another video. I just wanted to quickly explain as to what's going to be in this video, since I'm fairly sure it's going to be a very long one, so I didn't want anybody to get to the end and be disappointed. Today we're going to be looking at the G2D and Git2 action cameras when mounted to the X380. I'll start off with the unboxing and initial impressions. I'll go into a little bit of deeper look into like the settings on the camera and how I've installed and hooked up the G2D gimbal and all of that stuff. And then at the very end of the video we will have flight videos showing the G2D and Git2 with each other mounted to the X380. So with that out of the way, I hope you guys enjoy.
Hello folks, this is Husky-Flies, and I would usually say back here with another X8C video or back with another X380 video, but today's is actually a little bit different. Received two packages today. On the right side we've got the Git2 Pro action camera. Mostly got it for the 1080p at 60 FPS. I know it can do 2K, I think 30 FPS. But I don't even want to see my computer try to render that, so I'm not sure I'll be testing that out. But on the left side, we've got the G2D brushless gimbal. Alright folks, so first up, I'm just going to go ahead and unpack the G2D brushless gimbal. High precision, hyper stable, designed for aerial photographers extraordinarily. Yeah. Considering that little gem, I'm pretty sure most of what's in here is going to be English, but it should be pretty good. I've heard that Vaquera, as FPV guy would say, is a pretty good brand, and I've heard good things about this gimbal specifically, so guess we'll see how it all turns out. But for now, we're just going to unbox her. Let's pull this flap up, lift it up. Ooh. And as you can see, I know they make another version. I'm not sure if it's called the same thing, if it's G2D or G2 something else or whatever, but they make an all-aluminum version of this gimbal. This is the G2D, this is a plastic one, mostly plastic. There probably is, maybe there's no metal in here at all, maybe it's all plastic. I got this because it was cheaper and because it's lighter, and as you know, when you start stacking all this crap on your quad, weight matters a lot. But I'm sure the aluminum version would work just as well, and the weight would probably not be that much more and probably not be an issue. There it comes out. Looks like it's nicely packed in foam. And in the box, we still have our little manual, which, like I said, is probably going to be hard to decipher. Husky-Flies back here with the G2D unpacked. As you can see, it came fully assembled. So it's pretty much, you gotta hook it up and configure it, and then it should be pretty much ready to go. In the pack as well, we have this little manual right here, which is probably gonna be mostly hard to read if you're an English-only speaker. We've got a bag, and it comes with this little dock thing that I know you can, depending on what quad you have and if you're willing to drill holes, you can screw that on there, and then I believe the gimbal simply slides on and off, so you can have really easy access to your gimbal, as well as some cords which are going to be used in connecting it to the quad, obviously. For those curious about this, because I know I was when I first saw it, this apparently, I'll have to look in the manual some more, but it goes on here somewhere, and it's a weight adjustment bracket, which I thought was a really cool idea. So if you have a camera that's slightly off weight, or it's tilting to one side or whatever, just isn't working right with it, you can use this to adjust it in addition to, you know, the configuration software you can use. And I believe there are also, if you take a look right here, you see those two little holes down at the bottom there with the semicircles? I believe you can stick a little screw in there and rotate the screws in there, and that will adjust it as well. So I'm sure between the two you can figure it all out. Alright, now we're back with the Git2 Pro action cam. And for those of you who are thinking of ordering this off Amazon, the gimbal as well, there are a lot of resellers out there that do the whole Prime thing, so if you have Amazon Prime you can get 2-day shipping on this. I was an idiot. The listing above this had Amazon Prime, the listing below this had Amazon Prime, this one did not. So it came from like Fuyishang, China, and it took quite a while to get here, not as long as they said it would, fortunately, because they were telling me it was going to take like 2 months, but it took a while. So just keep that in mind if you're ordering this off Amazon. Something that this does have that looked pretty neat, at least in the preview videos, I'm not sure how it'll work on a quad, but I would think it would work cool, is this actually has a gyro sensor, and it will use it to stabilize the video. And it actually, in the videos I watched on this camera, seemed to make quite a big difference. So we'll see how that works out. It says right here, the camera weight is 64 grams, which the one I've been using, which I didn't realize at the time, but was intended more for helmet cams, is 170 grams. So by comparison, this is quite a bit lighter. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and dig in and unbox the Git2 Pro. Go ahead and cut this outer layer off. Put that over there. Here we've got this box just lifts off. And inside, behind this card, is the camera itself. Now something to keep in mind about this camera is that if you look at it, it's going to remind you of another camera, very popular brand that's out there, GoPro. And one of the reasons I got this camera specifically is because it can fit almost all the GoPro accessories. And believe me when I say that's a big plus. Most 90% of the gimbals out there, and you know, mostly gimbals, 90% of the gimbals out there are designed for GoPro weight distribution and GoPro format. So if you have a camera that, for example, is a long format like a Sony Action Cam, you'll probably be able to get it to work, but be prepared to 3D print, you know, get stuff 3D printed. So here we have the camera right here in its waterproof case. There's the LCD on the back. I'm going to go ahead and take this off. So you pull this down, rotate that forward, and this back just comes off the case, and there is the actual camera. Now it's kind of hard to emphasize here. I don't have the biggest hands, but this is a very, very small camera. Again, similar to GoPro size. Now this is the Pro packing, and there are actually very, very many different Pro packings for the camera. So sometimes it's difficult to tell exactly what it's going to come with. But Amazon is pretty good about, you know, in the description they'll list exactly what your product's coming with. So I would definitely just read down in the description and try to rely on that, because it looks like, for this one anyways, they were correct. So put this back on here, throw it over here, and this card says Get Up for Action Support Card. Looks like they have an app which will be available in 4 to 6 weeks. Might already be out. I will put that in the video if I can find it and download it to my Android phone. So in here we've got a baggie, this is just full of stuff. This looks like handlebar mount, sticky pads, basically a ton of different mounts. There's a lot of mounts and stuff in there. Put that right there. This looks like a cable for charging batteries and you know, using software if there's any software with it. This is a naked cover, I believe. I know what this is. This is a naked cover that you can put onto some of these mounts, which essentially keeps it open so it can receive audio better, and you know, the waterproof case is not distorting the lens or making the video quality worse. At least an hour, probably an hour and a half on a full charge, which when you're using this for quadcopters, not sure how much longer than that you're going to be flying. Alright, and the two items left in the box were the Get Up, Git2 Quick Start Guide, be taking a look through that, and a lens cover, which is not a bad idea when you're not using your camera, to just keep a lens cover on it to protect it. So that's a good thing that they included that. Alright folks, Husky-Flies back here again with the G2D gimbal mounted and ready on the bottom of the XK-Detect X380. So I just wanted to really quickly go over some of these options here on the bottom. If you see on the bottom here, you have all of these holes. So your function, I actually haven't used that yet. I think that's used to reset the gimbal. And these two, as I said before, are used to adjust the gimbal. One is roll, and I believe the other is gain. It didn't appear to be doing much when I was turning one of them, but the one for the roll, you'll definitely notice instantly the moment you begin turning it. This will begin swiveling one way or the other way. It's very sensitive. These pins on the back here are for various commands you can give to the gimbal depending on what quad you have and all of that stuff. So on the left you can see you have one for PIT or pitch, one for roll are those center pins, and one for auxiliary, which I'm not sure what the auxiliary would actually do on this gimbal, but perhaps that was something for the G3D for the pan function. And it just kind of got transferred over to this gimbal. I'm not sure. Feel free to leave a comment if anybody knows the answer to that. So there was some splicing done here, and I would highly suggest getting an extra set of cables if you can, because this cable that comes with it just really isn't long enough to reach where it needs to go. But essentially the way I have it hooked up is this is hooked into the pitch ground to the back of the quad. So you want the black wire going towards the back of the quad, and back of the gimbal more specifically. That hooks into this first set of pins. Again, you want the ground to the back of the quad. So you need to take the pitch pins and hook them into those first 3 pins towards the back of the quad. Then you need to hook these 2 pins into the power. Now, this is not the only way to do it by any means, and there are tons of videos out there that explain these pin positions and exactly what all of them are, and tons of videos explaining exactly how to hook up this quadcopter. This is not the only way. It's probably not the most efficient way because you're taking up every pin. If I ever decide to do FPV, I'm going to have to actually sap power off one of these pins right here, which I'm sure is not what they intended. So I would very much encourage you guys to go out there and look around to see exactly which set of installation instructions you'd like to follow. This is just what I used. As for the gimbal itself, I've had probably 3 or 4 flights using this gimbal with the Git2 action cam on the bottom of the X380, and I've got to say I'm thoroughly impressed. This gimbal has pretty much eliminated the jello from my video. Without a doubt, the roll stabilization is great. The pitch stabilization is great. Now, because this is a 2-axis gimbal, you're not going to have any stabilization when you're yawing. But with a wide-angle field of view, I did not notice much difference. If you're going for more of a narrow-angle field of view, in the yaws, you will see some jello, and I will display that at the end of the video with the flight clips. As for mounting the camera to your G2D, this is the front plastic piece that basically slips on here where these screws are, and then you would flip it over, hopefully with the camera already in place and already in there, and you can see right here, not sure if this camera is going to focus or not, there are 2 hex screws, one on the top and one on the bottom. And the G2D came with a little hex wrench. You just go in there and just, tighten this plastic piece up to the front of it, and that's how you mount the camera. Now, I will admit that's a little annoying, especially with the Git2 for a few reasons. Firstly, who wants to have to mess with hex screws every time they dismount and remount their camera? Secondly, because of the Git2's design, on this side is where it has all the ports, which is the left side of the camera, and mounted in there, you can see that that left side is on this motor. So if you don't have the right type of micro USB for this camera, then, and the one that came with it definitely, is not going to allot enough room for this. You're not going to be able to connect it because this motor is going to be in your way. And that really is annoying with the fact that you have to screw it and unscrew it. Now, one option you could do is probably the simplest. You could simply flip this over, mount it in upside down, rebalance everything, and still have plenty of free access to the port because as you can see, when this is put on here, the sides aren't covered. So you would definitely be able to have access to that port. I plan on doing that in the future, and then in post-processing you could just flip the video or whatever you need to do. I do plan on doing that in the future, but for now I had just gotten it balanced and I really didn't feel like rebalancing it, so probably something I'll do down the road though, because it would definitely make it easier. That way you can charge the Git2, you can get your videos off of it without actually having to dismount it from the quad and mess with these screws every single time. Okay, so now that we've discussed the gimbal installation and all of that, I figure I'll go ahead and jump into the camera settings, and then we will probably move on to flight footage thereafter. Again, this is a really tiny camera, very lightweight, 64 grams, I believe the box said. And I just wanted to go over some functions and settings on it, just so you guys know exactly what you're getting. So you hold this front button for 3 seconds, and it will turn on. Got that red light on the front, which I believe means you are in video mode. And then on the back here, you can see you've got the LCD. Can't really see anything right now because the lens cover's on it. This side button over here is, you only have 3 buttons. You have this one on the front, you have your top one, and you have the side one. The side button goes to settings. Initially when I got this camera and hit that, I thought that was the only menu you could access. I was very wrong. That goes for the setting, that goes to the settings in whatever mode the camera is currently in. So for example, right now we're in video mode. If I hit that, it'll take me to video mode settings. So I'm just going to quickly go through these really quick and switch modes as we go. To navigate the menu, you hit the side button, then you hit the front button to change the categories within the menu, and then if there's something you want to alter, you hit the top or record button. So right now we're on video resolution. I'm just going to go through those quick. We've got 1080p at 60 FPS, 1080p at 30, 720p at 120, 720p at 60, 720p at 30, WVGA, VGA at 240 FPS, 2160p at 24 FPS, so 2K resolution, this will only go up to 24, 1440p at 30 FPS, 1296p at 30 FPS, 1440p 4:3 aspect ratio, and then we're back to 1080p at 60 FPS. So those are all your resolutions. Going through some of the other settings here, we've got loop recording. We've got the audio recording audio level, which I have to say the audio that came out on this camera, which again I'll display in the flight footage, is so much better than the older one I had. However, it handles audio, it does it very well. The date stamp. You have your time-lapse settings for if you want to put it in time-lapse mode. And it has 1 frame every 200 milliseconds, 1 frame a second, 1 frame every 5 seconds, 1 frame every 10 seconds, 1 frame every 30 seconds, 1 frame every minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. So depending on what you're trying to time-lapse, whether it's really fast or really slow moving, you can kind of conserve space on the card by not time-lapsing it as quickly. Have video snapshot timer, white balance, custom white balance, menu button functions. So this button on the front, you can set it to do various things when you tap it. Exposure settings, I had that down a little bit, trying to catch a sunset. ISO settings, color settings, and within color you've got normal, black and white, sepia, vivid. Gyro stabilization, a great feature, seems to work really awesomely. Wide dynamic range, slow motion, sharpness settings, metering settings, field of view settings. You've only got 2 field of views on this particular camera. You have wide and narrow. Motion detection, it'll automatically start recording if it detects motion. And the G sensor, which I believe is used to conserve video in the case of an accident. When I first started using the camera, I had it on a medium sensitivity, and I noticed it would kind of cut my videos and move them all around, and it was kind of difficult to find them, and I wasn't really losing any videos off of it, so I decided to turn that off. So that's all of your video settings. Now we'll head on into the next mode, which is photos. So now going through photo settings very quickly, we've got image size, 16 megapixels, 12 megapixels, 8 megapixels, 5 megapixels, 3 megapixels, back up to 16 megapixels with a 4:3 aspect ratio. Some of those lower ones were in 16:9 if you want a widescreen look. We've got shutter speed, date stamp, time lapse, self-timer mode, exposure settings, ISO settings, color settings, white balance, custom white balance, capture mode, so you've got single, 3 sequence, 10 sequence, and single. Sharpness, metering, raw photo mode. So now we're in the review mode, where you can watch all your videos on the little LCD before you actually get them onto your computer. Now, something a little confusing, to flip through your videos, you hit this record button at the top, and as you can see, it's flipping through different videos. And then if you actually want to play one, you hit this side button, have play current file, delete current file, lock unlock file, and slideshow. So I'll go ahead and show you that it does indeed play. As you can see, that was me getting my quad ready one day. So we'll go ahead and head into the next mode. System settings. This is where a lot of the important stuff is. So once you get to this mode, it's expressly for system settings. You hit the record button to go into it. You've got quick capture. You can turn the beeps on or off. I left them off because they're kind of annoying. Over screen display OSD info. Car mode auto start. Custom text stamp. LED status. All LEDs are on. Screen auto sleep. Auto power off. Date and time settings. System language. Frequency. TV mode, RC pairing, RC operation mode, USB mode, format the SD card, default basically reset all the settings, and version information. So that was a quick look at all these settings you can get access to on the Git2. Overall, I gotta say I'm pretty impressed with this little thing. Does a really good job of recording. The white balance is a little weird on it, but I've really only noticed it when I'm doing things that are generally intensive in that part of the camera, like looking at the sunset or something like that. It'll darken out the ground. But it's also very quick. When you tilt the gimbal back down and aren't looking at more of the ground than the sun, it will light the ground up really quickly. So it's pretty snappy little camera as far as that's concerned. Also, guys, just some things I wanted to say about the Do you mind? Do you mind? Also, guys, just some things I wanted to say about the Git2. I had mentioned earlier there was an app coming out for it. Now, I'm pretty sure this camera has been out for longer than 4 to 6 months. That's when they said the app was coming out. So as of yet, I have not been able to find the official Gitup app, but there are a couple apps that will work with this, and I'm actually going to put a link down in the description to a page just about this action cam that shows all the apps that work with it, all the GoPro accessories that work with it. Just really a valuable source of information for this camera. But without further ado, I'll go ahead and get to the flight footage and be back in a minute.
Okay guys, so here's some test footage of the Gitup Git2 and the G2D Gimbal working together on the underside of the X380. Initially, here is just some test footage of me messing around with it inside, but very shortly we'll get on to the flight footage. Guys, so here you can see the G2D stabilizing the camera below the X380, and irregardless of the quadcopter movements, it's keeping us pretty level with the ground. I haven't gotten it quite perfectly balanced yet, but it does the stabilization job very well. And looking up here, you'll see those little pink things. Those are actually the foam earbuds. I put those inside of the little grommets that it comes with just to help it stabilize better, and that seemed to make a big difference, so that's definitely something to keep in mind. Here we're going up a little bit higher, and you can see the picture remains very stable. This is a panorama, and there is a bit of fisheye effect on the Git2, and you can see there it kind of, where the sun is, it kind of fades the sky out. But for most intents and purposes, this is a pretty level picture here, even while it's moving to the side. And here's some slow movement a little bit closer to the ground, and I believe in a second I've got some footage with the tilt down showing it rising into the air. Here we go. So now we're going up. The G2D is doing a pretty good job. And it's very neat to be able to get those new perspectives and new different angles and be able to change it on the fly, you know, while you're actually flying the quad. I find that the beeping on the transmitter really helps me to keep place of where my gimbal is. I'll usually basically get it at level whenever it's on the ground, and then once I've got it at level and I take off and it gets high, I'll count the beeps in my head. So if I go 3 down, I know 3 back up takes me to level again, and that helps me keep track until I get FPV. And here you can see we have the gimbal tilted downwards, and we are coming in for a landing for this short test flight. Okay guys, next up is some comparison footage. The first one was taken with the fixed Drift Ghost HD cam, just on a anti-vibration mount, and the second was with the current Git2 and G2D setup I have. I'm going to leave the sound in these ones because that's the main point of this part. I just want you to compare the sounds and look at how much better the Git2 handles audio. I know that that's not something most of us usually use in quadcopter footage. We usually put a song in or something, but I figured it was important to mention anyways. Alright guys, so this is the last clip here, and this is using a narrow field of view. Everything you've seen out of the Git2 so far has been a wide. I just wanted to point out the jello sort of on the ground, that little bit of shaking. Again, this only occurs in the yaw. The G2D keeps it well stabilized in pitch and roll. And if you use a wide field of view, you're going to get more of the landing gear, but I didn't notice this as much. I think it's a lot less noticeable in the wide field of view. So I figured that was just something to keep in mind.
Alright guys, back here with the X380, Git2, and G2D Gimbal. Final conclusions on the setup. I really like it. Now this is my first gimbal purchase. And this is my second action cam, but as I mentioned before, the first one is more meant for helmet cam, so I guess this was my first action cam that I could really use on my quad. I could use the other one, but only in a fixed position. I couldn't use any sort of gimbal or any sort of mount to rotate it up and down. I gotta say, I'm very impressed with both products. The G2D is probably going to retail you for about $60 to $70 USD. This camera will retail you for probably $130 to $160 depending on which package you get and what all the accessories that come with it. But yeah, I'm very impressed with this. I've used it for, I've had both of these products I'd say for a little under a week, and I've used them in 4 or 5 flights. They have really smoothed out my video. In addition to, you know, stabilizing it level with the ground, it has eliminated a lot of my jello issues I had with having a camera on a fixed mount. So if you're in the market for an action cam or a gimbal, both of these come highly recommended for me, and both of them together seem to work very well. Anyways, Husky-Flies here again, and if you enjoyed, I hope you hit that like and subscribe. Thanks.